I didn't get many questions so far, so please do send your questions over under the Q&A. But there were a couple comments, for example, that there is an empowerment of children through self-defense, which teaches children how to recognize signs of violence in early stages. And I will share the link to this in the chat so that you can see it. And we have one question from Angelica Russo. How important is to work on changing the approach to the social norms of adults in children's youth entourage, like teachers, parents, as well? How encouraging can be supporting the role model for a child? And she didn't ask this to anyone in particular, so if some of you want to go ahead and comment on it. Slavica or Daniela?
What may be added to the presentation we already have done is that regarding the trust in institutions, we have heard from children also that there are some programs in the schools and there are some educational training some of them went through, but some of those trainings are not connected, not prepared, sorry, for children, and not, as one of the girls said to us, not attractive to children. So as adults, as professionals working with children, we should be aware about the language we used to use, about the attitude, about the way we present the materials to them in order to make it easy to accept by them, and in order to make them capable to realize what adults can and would like to do in order to help them in situations of violence, as in any other situation in their lives.
May I add something, Judith,
yes,
about this? As we saw in our research, there is a decline in adults' authority in relation to their children. And also there is an increasing divergence in values, beliefs, and behaviors between adults and children. I call this situation kind of generational gap, because adults feel unprepared to acknowledge the challenges their children have to face, especially in relation with new technologies and addiction to games and to the internet. And children feel misunderstood by adults with regard to their preferences and ways of spending time, communication, behavior. There is a kind of social tension among children and adults. Adults feels like children are super empowered, having more rights now, while adults are overwhelmed and unequipped to face new challenges they have in relationship with children. And maybe that's why we have kind of two different positions and opinions about what children need and what adults can offer and how to protect them against violence.
Thank you. There were a couple of questions that keep repeating. The PowerPoints will be available after the conference, and we'll be making that available on our website. If you would like a certificate of attendance of this conference, please send us an email to info@childhub.org so that we have your email address and name and we can fill out the certificate. Also, the research reports, I will send in the chat. We have 6 reports ready in their final form. There are 3 more that are in progress of publication. So I will put the link in the chat, and after that we will be sharing these reports, all of them, over the newsletters and the executive summaries will be available in your national language. So the national report executive summary will be available in your national language. Another question that was here is whether there is sexual abuse training in secondary schools. No. This is a question to anyone who would like to answer.
Judith, may I try to answer?
Please.
I'm sorry, I switched to my phone, so my camera is off. As part of formal education and not in Serbia, there are civil society organizations, centers for social work that are dealing with these topics, and of course, schools and school professionals, but as part of formal education and not. And there is a huge discussion today in the civil society sector among women's organizations and women's rights organizations about gender aspect of school books. And it's a very important topic for us today because the school books boost the social and gender stereotypes in terms of violence, not only against the children, but also women and adults. So that's a very important topic. And thank you for this question. I just wanted to share also.
Oh, there was a question to Daniela. Have you asked children what type of support they would need from family or teachers in order to feel confident about sharing their experiences of violence?
Yes, we had such a question in our research, and many of them said that they need continuous psychological support from adults in the schools, and also from parents. They need more understanding and close relationship with them. They were complaining they don't have close and emotional relationship with parents, and I think for us as adults, it's a kind of food for thought to think about our relationship and our openness to our children. Thank you for a very good question. Yes, we need to change the world we are along with our children, because it seems that we have a huge blockage in our communication with them.
Related to this question, perhaps Antoanetta, how can we help people so that their parents take them seriously?
I was just reading the other question. How we can you repeat?
How can we help young people so that they can have a relationship with their parents so that they take them seriously?
Oh, it's a question for $1,000, I think. So, you know, in the age of adolescence, it's difficult to parents to handle this issue of children looking for other role models and being inspired by the people outside the family. So it's a problem for the parents how to handle this issue. And really, we need to support them and help them to realize that they have to accept this and to stay with this uncertainty and challenges that children are making to us in order to check if we are always with them. They have the secure base, secure place from where to start to explore the world, to have some mistakes, and be sure they have this strong back, even though they are challenging us and making nervous and crazy sometimes. So it's my short answer to it. But if you want to speak more about this, we will try to connect. You can write me and we can speak about it. We have a lot of different ways of working with parents, and especially in Bulgaria. It now is a very serious political problem to work with parents in social services, because social system and educational system also refuses to work with parents, to care and support parents. We have a lot of efforts, of course, in our systems, and especially in the NGO sector. And these international meetings are a good source of new skills and new ideas that we can use in this. But really, we have to push a big effort to change the political positions about the educational system, social service system, and how they could serve the society's needs in the 21st century. Sorry, I was a little bit long.
Thank you. Marina, there was a specific question to you or a comment from a user saying they do not agree with you that school associates do not act in accordance with legal obligations. Can you explain on what basis you have claimed this?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I agree. As I mentioned in the speech, 1/3 does not act on the binding laws. That means the two-thirds actually acts on it. But still, it is what is for me more concerning is the fact that the people that are so close to children spend most of their day with them, such as teachers and kindergarten workers, actually do not. 1/3 of them have never, not once, been on any kind of education that empowers them and gives them skills and knowledges how to recognize, report, and how to deal with children who are experiencing or witnessing violence. So what I wanted to stress out is actually that we do have one certain percentage of school workers and kindergarten workers, and of course within all child protection system, one part of employees and workers who do not have opportunity to actually know how to deal with it. So I think that is an area for more progress, starting from faculty curricula and college curricula, and then onwards, because we have, as I mentioned in the speech, very strong policies regarding it, and but we are good, but we still need, I think we need to search from and look from ourselves to progress and to be even better, because children, what we also found out during this research is that the school administrative and the school management actually often has a feeling that they have provided and they have been acting in accordance with the law and had done all the dealings and procedures. But on the other hand, children and students, pupils sometimes do not see that way. So there's some kind of shortage in this perception. We often, adults, see that we have done everything we could, but children point out that they don't see that we maybe were so successful in those dealings. And I have to stress that this is actually qualitative research, so it can't be generalized, of course, but the depth on the stories and the richness of the stories do implicate that children, and especially those from vulnerable groups, are in risk to be victims or to have experience with violence. Also, for any further data regarding my speech, I was also referring to the research we have done within this project, Enhance the Right of a Child to be Safe. It can be looked up. I can put it in the chat so that people can see more data. Thank you for the question and the opportunity to speak more.
Thank you. And one for Bujar, are there any protocols, I guess, in Kosovo concerning cases of sexual violence in schools and education system?
Thank you, Judith. In fact, not indeed. At the school level, the issue of the violence is very poorly treated. And particularly when we come about more systematic approach, like having, as I mentioned, the specific focal points I mean, of course, all issues I treated from the school management, but we don't have specific people who are delegated and mandated for treating and for creating this confidence among children that they feel very freely and very trusted to go and deal with the issue and discuss with the issue. And particularly, there is no reference to any kind of protocol or documentation how this system should be. I mean, either from the school, either from the child perspective, or from the school personnel to report. I mean, so far about the reporting different aspects of misconduct in public institutions, there is the law for whistleblowing, but it goes too far when it comes to the child protection. I mean, we need to have more focus on this approach at the school level, at the child level, and particularly this kind of mechanisms and protocols and legislation to more outline how this reference system would work, like standard operating procedures when it comes to school violence. And we do actually lack. We have some level of more municipal actions and round tables who are treating from the municipal perspective. And school is just a part of it, but not with the active role or not with something which is paying a lot of efforts when treating this issue. So we need more to go to the school level. We need more to have a kind of approach where we engage teachers, other school personnel, like for example psychologists, can have a lot of role in this direction, but also mobilization of community and families and parents in this reaction collaboration.
Thank you. Question to Tatiana, if you're with us. How have you experienced the cooperation of schools in your research? Is there willingness to recognize or address the issue?
I'm here, but I'd like to hear the question again, excuse me, about the cooperation of schools with...
Yeah, how was the cooperation with schools and how was their willingness to recognize the issue of violence and to address it?
I must say that the cooperation with schools was extraordinarily good. Actually, in Serbia, the schools were hosts of the research. The schools organized the focus groups and all the tools we used in direct work with children, both with children and adults, because we also talked to the adults from the community, the representatives of the institutions and the local institutions. And I think this research and the reports don't name the communities and schools which were involved in order to protect the privacy of children. And that's the reason why I can't speak in public which schools, but I hope that people from these schools are today with us. And we express huge gratitude to their contribution, because they show actually the awareness on the need to work on themselves as professionals and schools and institutions. So that would be, in short, my answer. And I think I'm answering in the name of Slavica too, because she worked in the urban community, and I worked with school in small rural community.
Thank you. And maybe a question to Marina: how to make teachers aware that social development of children is as important as their intellectual achievement?
That is a great question. As you maybe heard at the end of my speech, we asked the children, what do they perceive that could actually contribute to a violent to society that progressed towards zero violence? And there were numerous answers, and we can all gather them under one answer: to communicate with us more, not to make everything into a lesson and lecture and just showing us how we did wrong and how we are wrong. They actually need a time just to tell their stories, to tell what they experience on a daily basis. The research was, we kind of planned for first day to the last for 3 hours. We ended 5 hours because they were so excited, saying that they thought this will be some dull workshop or something, but just actually making a space and time to listen to them was empowering for them. And we really wanted to highlight this in a Croatian speech, just to assure the time and the space for children to talk, to tell their stories, to hear their voices. And that is very protective factor. And I think that I would love if curricula and the academic curricula would be built so that it foreseen the space for just talking. I think we all lack of it, and especially now with all this pandemic and lack of social interaction. So I really do strongly recommend to enable time for communication with young people. They're beautiful.
Daniela, did you want to add something?
Yes, I wanted to add something, but Marina stole my idea. Of course, the social and psychological development of children is very important to be known by teachers. But I think our major goal should be to include these type of topics in the initial formation of our teachers in the university level. At policy level, we can change the topics that are learned during the university studies, so that lifelong education also could include data and information about the gender differences, for example, among children, or about the psychological development and social development. Now, in this context, with all these social media and the other devices, because the old school didn't include many topics about psychology of children. So we have to make advocacy effort to include in our curricula and to provide support and guidelines for parents and teachers on VAC, on alternative educational models, on parenting approaches in upbringing, on gender issues, social inclusion, discrimination, because old school didn't include such topics.
Thank you. And last but not least, I just wanted to say that we did get a comment from a young psychologist who was commenting that no matter how she speaks to children, the violence doesn't seem to change, and she's really at wit's end what to do. And speaking quickly with colleagues here, the researchers suggested how useful we found the little peer-to-peer group that we have created for the research, and that such peer groups can really help you to get that type of support that you really need, where there is a lot of knowledge among your peers, your colleagues, and we encourage you to create or find those peer groups where you can ask for help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judith. I think that's absolutely spot on. We see, unfortunately, I keep on hoping that one country will say, well, we've seen a huge decrease in violence in the school, but it just seems that it's so prevalent everywhere. And that
Irina, awareness and education of children about forms of gender-based violence, reporting such forms of violence, issue of gender stereotypes, especially in education system. What are experiences? What's the practice? And is there any progress?
It really reminds me of being in school. So I think I saw that question in the chat box. And, I hope that my speech today was also in that direction. I'm a firm believer in change. I've seen change, especially in the field of gender equality over the past 10 years here in Romania, and it's been incredible change. Of course, we still have a lot to work on, and but this doesn't mean that there is no change. And as I showed in my speech, I think we as adults are even should even believe more in this change and should be, how should I say, more energized by this idea, because we owe it to children who actually, fantasize about a life that is very different from the current reality. Now, in more concrete terms, the changes that I've seen here in Romania in terms of gender issues in schools. So there have been several proposals to change instruction materials in relation to gender sensitivity. The debate has been going on for a good 4 or 5 years, and I hope that soon some concrete actions will be taken in that direction. The issue is very technical, meaning that at this point in time there is all pedagogical products are approved for all the levels of education through a ministerial order. Obviously, this order will have to be revised, and there have been, I think, postponements for this revision for the past 2 years. But in the future, things will change, and I hope to see at least textbooks that are giving a more real, in many ways, a more real rendering of life, and not to have only, not to have the classical examples where men are driving and become engineers and women dust the house and scrub the floors as examples in primary school textbooks. So this is one change. The other change that I've seen, and I think it's important to mention here, is that more and more teachers themselves are interested in gender equality. I think we owe more to the pedagogical community to explain more what gender equality means. We are also facing a strong backlash on that issue, and I think all the countries in the region are facing the same kind of backlash, whereas gender equality is redefined as something that is alien to local societies. We owe it to our communities to be better at explaining what gender equality means.
Thank you. Question to Ivana. What have children shared with you in terms of their strategies to tackle physical or verbal abuse?
Okay, can you hear me? I can talk about perspective from Bosnia and Herzegovina. We made a lot of changings on a political level. We have a lot of documents that, for example, some kind of referral mechanisms that school can, where school have one of a part, and school professionals like teachers are involved in both primary and secondary prevention of everything that is related with child development. We work a lot on secondary prevention of children at risks, in both internal and external problems in children. But what I can say, we work a lot on developing adequate value system in both in children, youth, and also adults. But I would like to say something that it's more important to develop healthy school culture. We have to know that the way we behave as adults, as professionals, teachers, psychologists, pedagogists in a school is a crucial factor of prevention of violence. We can have a lot of workshops with children, raise their knowledge about violence, type of violence. During my research with children from marginalized groups, I found that those children know a lot of violence, types of violence, the way they can prevent others' violent behavior. But they said to me that they do not feel safe in a school, and that they do not feel that their teachers know that sometimes some of them behave or is a violent. So we need to change our school climates and cultures.
Thank you. Question to Isela. You spoke about boys and girls. Was there any information on children coming from marginalized groups, especially Roma, in terms of the difference between how they experience violence?
Yes, not only about Roma, but in the Egyptian communities that both are living in Albania, actually. But what is heartbreaking is that the most marginalized groups are, of course, the most vulnerable to violence, and they are also almost sometimes outside of child protection systems. And you could see that the children who are more protected are those who have protective parents, sometimes an older brother, sometimes a mentor type of adult that supports them, a small group of trusted friends who stand up for them in cases of bullying. Those who aren't ridiculed because of their ethnicity or their looks or their disability or other reasons. So if in a child you find 2 or 3 of these factors all together, all his vulnerabilities increase.
Thank you. There was another question to you about what differences can you see in perpetrators of violence? What's the motivation behind it, or the behavior?
Well, in terms of norms, it is a general attitude of the powerful towards the most vulnerable. And especially with regard to children, this norm still stands, and children should obey and the children should submit to orders from adults. So parents will do it, teachers will do it. And another type of perpetrator who was viewed by the children as such, and it's important to be emphasized, is also the media. Especially in cases of sexual violence, it is really considered a perpetrator who is actually destroying lives of young children whose cases are identified, reported, and if a case is reported to the court, then the media will hunt the victim and will really treat it as prey.
Thank you. And a similar question to Irina as well about Roma children. You did address this in your speech, but can you talk a bit more about how they experience school and violence in school? You're on mute.
Hi. Okay, now you can hear me. So indeed, I think the topic of ethnic discrimination is a key one moving forward, especially for countries like Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, Albania. Obviously, well, I don't know if this is obvious, but in Romania we have a framework that, like a policy framework that tackles Roma discrimination in schools. The policy framework generally addresses the issue of segregation. In this research, I was absolutely stunned to be walking into a school that was clearly segregated, a Roma segregated school. It's a matter of spatial segregation. It's a matter of the levels of education that Roma children have access to as compared to non-Roma children. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that it's happening in 2020. Another thing that I need to emphasize in relation to Roma children and violence. Obviously, Roma children face widespread discrimination, I think, in the educational system from the majority population, be that majority population teachers or students. And often these children are pigeonholed into a role that is about Roma criminality, because this is the majority perception of Roma. And it's true that some Roma children come from violent communities, like violent let's say family structure, extended family structures. But if when they come, but if the only role model that is being reinforced in the educational system is one about criminality and marginalization, they will never be able to break this cycle. What to do? I don't have any concrete solution. Obviously, tackling stereotypes and discrimination through all the means that we have at hand, be that education, like formal education, informal education, media awareness, more media awareness. This is an issue. Using young people, using influencers who are young, like YouTube and TikTok influencers to promote messages about anti-discrimination and anti-violence are some of the solutions that I'm just thinking out on the top of my head now.
Thank you. And this is the last question is to anyone who would like to answer. It's about COVID. It seems that many of the professionals on this call are basically helpless in how to help children in this situation where they cannot do the type of socialization that they really need for their development. How can we professionals help or create spaces for them to safely do that? I'm just trying to look at you and see who wants to answer. Yes, Irina. You're on mute again.
I know, it's so annoying. Okay, just to draw from, obviously there is something that I didn't say in the speech, and that is that in Romania we conducted one part of the research face-to-face and the other part online. And I think creating the time and space for children to talk about emotions and violence. This one was a difficult one. Like, okay, we did research on violence, and this is a difficult topic. But I think what it showed me was that children need this kind of informal engagements that are active. So we use participatory methods, which mean that they had to be a little bit active in the house, in front of their phones or in front of their computers, but active and honest. I think that also helped. Actually, I looked at it as a sort of model of empowerment in a way. So I think what we did in like through these research activities made the children who were part of the research more aware and more empowered and less bored, to be frank. It's complicated, but I think my part of the answer would be that virtual space has opportunities to create virtual spaces where children can talk.
Thank you.
I can add something, yeah, just to first to reinforce what Irina said, because we had the same experience, and also recently I was involved in study assessing the response of 2 municipalities to the needs of citizens, families, and children in the times of COVID. And what I learned from that and from how children are functioning in schools and what school psychologists, school social workers said, and teachers, it seems that there is a need to mix this virtual space with live presence. And actually during teaching, the same is being done, but not to remain only within formal teaching hours, because everybody's tired and exhausted after a year, but that would need surely some support from the state level for adding extra teachers or extra psychologists to do this work. So to have these meetings that Irina mentioned of children who cannot follow virtually the life reality of their peers and their schools, and not to drop out of it. And what's said about that is that Roma and Egyptian children were the ones who, many of them cannot access the virtual space at all. And it could easily be done through internet access offered to their houses. so that it was relevant actually to give them a phone or a tablet and then not to offer them internet access in their families. So how could they use that? Teachers and schools are trying to compensate individually on a school-based level through getting children at schools and doing small groups and doing that for formal teaching. And the same could be done for creating these groups of peer support when children can come together and share and talk, and not in the form of informative groups about violence, types of violence and reporting, which is already being done, but to share their experiences. In our study, children really came in the midst of a pandemic and they were all wearing masks and we had a lot of distance, but they were so excited to be there. And we stayed there for a whole day and none of them wanted to go home. And I will never forget one girl who she chose between going to Tirana, to the capital city, to be in a live show in television or an activity that she was part of. And she chose to be in our focus group. And we asked her twice, but she wanted to be there because they really need it.